Hey everybody, welcome back to the Skillist Podcast. I'm the cool host, Matt Corradino, Caribbean Earth Skills, Mount Victor Camp.
I'm the scowling host, Brad Salon, Roots, Vermont.
I'm t-shirts and he's scarves. Yeah. That's how we do it. Scarf.
The guy in the hat.
Back. That's right. The guy with the hat. No need for a hat except for a sun hat. Oop, shade my eyeballs. Hey, yeah. So, You're cold again?
I'm back in the frozen north.
The cold again? He just got back in the cold again. That's all I got.
Yeah.
You like my Willie Nelson?
Is
that good enough for you?
Pretty perfect.
And meanwhile, I'm having mango and coconut smoothie. Yeah. Oh my God. That's how we do it. So, anyway, this week we are going to pontificate about survival trips. Practice survival trips, not survival situations.
Yes.
How the hell do you talk about that? Anyway, and
did you hear about that Peruvian dude, I think, who was out at sea for 95 days?
95 days?
Yeah.
No, I didn't hear about that guy.
Yeah,
they
just found him, like off the coast. And maybe it was Peru or it was some South American coastal country.
Some non-American place where foreigners live.
Maybe it was...
What was he in?
He was in a boat.
Duh.
Eating a little skiff or something, like a little fishing boat.
Okay. Like a little, okay.
Yeah, but he was, catching birds and killing turtles and catching some fish and eating cockroaches and the whole...
cockroaches.
Yeah. 95 days at sea, though. That's brutal.
That's a long time, right?
Yeah.
He took off from the coast of Peru and then landed back. They found him off the coast. He didn't drift anywhere far or anything like that?
Yeah, a helicopter spotted him, and then they picked him up in a boat.
You know how incredibly hard it is to spot a small boat at sea with a helicopter? That's freaking lucky.
Yeah. He talked to God the whole time, and that was his message for the world, was that, God is everything, which honestly makes sense. Like, having something outside of yourself to keep you going for 95 days.
Yeah, you got to have it.
Yeah.
You got to have it. That's pretty well scientifically proven that people who have faith of some sort end up with far better outcomes, not just like survival situation outcomes, but like better all life outcomes, income, social standing. I know a lot of people who are like atheistic or anti-religious might take umbrage with that, but look into the statistics. There's been studies done on it that when you have some sort of spiritual practice, religious beliefs, there's far better outcomes.
And on that note, we're starting a cult, and you can join it.
I already started a cult, Brad. It's too late.
Well, yeah,
you can join my cult. I already joined a cult a long time ago. Yeah. I'm risen to leader of the cult. Leader status. Are you thirsty? Are you thirsty out there? Would you like to drink? Drink. It's good for you. Anyway.
So survival trips as a learning tool, right?
You're damn right. Well, all right, so let's start off with a minus, because it's pretty obvious to people, if you were to say like the learning opportunities from a survival trip, most people would be like, well, duh, it's the whole thing. But I think we should start off with the minus, which would, it's kind of important to point out, is that like you can only put your energy into one thing at a time, and generally speaking, you're going to spend more time on that 1, 2, 3 things than you are anything else. And you're not going to be making a bow and an arrow. You're not going to usually be making like a refined basket. You're not usually going to be making a refined anything, because you're going to be too busy feeding yourself.
Yeah, they're not the time for advanced skills. That's for sure.
No, and so it's like it starts to beg the question, well, what's the point of the advanced skills? It's like, because with that advanced skill, it would give you time for more and more refined skills, right? Like hunting with a throwing stick is a fucking hell of a lot harder than it is with an atlatl or a spear or goodness knows, a bow and arrow in a thick forest, right? That's like a game changer right there. Or, like, I know gorge hooks work really well, but we've actually had far more success with like a rounded hook, like a traditional hook, and that's a hell of a lot harder to make than a gorge hook would be like your survival level. So there actually is a big minus to it, right? Like, just if you think about water, right? How much time are you spending like gathering and boiling water in a real survival situation? That potentially could be hours out of your day just for water, and it's something that makes so much sense. It's not like you're necessarily learning about something new to know to boil your water, right?
Well, so that kind of begs the question of like, what's the goal of your survival trip? And does, every survival trip doesn't need to assume you only have the clothes on your back. I think those are important to do, and it's a great test of like your baseline survival skills. But then from there, I think gradating your trips based on what you do want to practice, like going on
Is gradating a word?
No, I don't think so.
Great ating. I'm great ating cheese.
Great aping? Yeah.
I'm great aping. What you talking about?
But I think people knew what I meant, and then you derailed the entire conversation. So
thank you. Anyway, while I'm gradating cheese on my survival trip to try to decide what fine bits I want to find out from this trip and why I'm going to leave my cheddar cheese at home and bring only gorgonzola.
So my point was that you can pick and choose what you're trying to learn when you take a trip, and focus your survival trips to more than just full survival, which makes a lot of sense, to me.
Hence my question, like, what was the guy in?
Right.
You know what I mean? There's a whole nother level to, like, he was on a freaking like survival raft. Yeah, right. Compared to a fishing boat, just that alone might have added, a lot of calories to his plate. Or like just sleeping. How many more hours of sleep did he gain by not having to sleep on that soft, bubbling raft right there?
Man.
Right. So that's why the question. God, suck.
Yeah.
It's just straight up suck. Wonder if he had. Well, Peru, you might not need as much sun protection. Who would have thunk? Like primitive sun protection would be like an important thing to practice, right? But like survival, you don't know what it's going to be, what you're going to have to like protect yourself from or keep yourself alive from. So it's why it's important to practice all things, and why you don't just practice shelter, basic fire making, there's your encouragement for doing those advanced skills, because you never know what you're going to need. And maybe like working on that bow, learning how to bend wood really well will, I don't know, make you help you make a fish hook in a different situation, right? Like maybe that advanced skill is going to carry over in a different way than you expect.
Right.
But yeah, so then that begs the question, like, what's the best way to do it? I mean, there's no best way to do it, but what's like the best way for a beginner, like, and I would argue that for a total beginner, it would be start with shelter.
Yeah.
Bring what you need, but make shelter like an absolute need for your survival trip.
Right. That was going to be my first suggestion, is do focus trips around like, okay, we're bringing everything we need, but we don't have a fire starting method to cook with. So we need to make a fire every time we want to cook, and we're going to not bring a lighter. Right. And then, like you're talking about with shelter, we're going to bring everything we need except for a tent and a sleeping bag, and we're going to build whatever shelter makes the most sense in this environment and camp in that. And then
I was almost about to say, like, I didn't see the point necessarily of fire, because that's something that you can so easily simulate at home. However, it ends up being far harder in a primitive survival survival practice situation even than at your house, just from not having the option of being like, this is the wood I'm going to use.
Right. And when your meal is a part of it, like when you don't eat until you have that fire, then you're not able to just give up. You're like, oh, we hiked 8 miles in, we'd better make this fire.
Yeah, well, raw meat, yay! Woo, yeah. Raw meat! Or raw, certain plant foods you definitely don't want to eat raw.
Yeah.
So, you can really suck without a fire sometimes. Or just your water,
Yeah. And so, doing focus trips is a good way to start. And then doing stuff with other people, I would definitely recommend. I mean, my first several, like, survival trips were we brought like either hammocks or a tarp and a knife or some small combination of things, fishing line and hooks. But then we like got all of our food off the landscape, or we brought just like rice and a little bit of beans and a cook pot, but nothing else. And we were like, all right, we're going to stay as long as we can. You know, like those trips were really awesome in that it wasn't just straight into full survival, but you know, you don't want to just eat unflavored rice and beans. You can, but like you're then, you know, mashing, you're like, okay, can I eat these acorns? I've heard you can. I've read books about it. I've had lectures on it. Right. But like it pushed us into doing that kind of thing, or being like, wait, how many raspberries can I actually eat in a day? You know, like,
a shitload.
Right.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing when I was doing the TV show. Like, there was one day where I was just like, let me see how this goes if I don't eat any berries. Because, like, every time I passed a berry bush, I picking and eating the berries. And it was later in the season. There was no reason to, like, conserve any bush that was around my shelter. So, like, every single berry, every single time. And the difference between that one day and the other days was pretty enormous. Like... Yeah, it's not something that you would like feed yourself on, but it's definitely something that I found to be like pretty interesting, how much energy you can get from that. You know, that right there, your comment there kind of begs even the question of like what foods are the best to bring for like improving your skill level. We usually bring potatoes or some sort of like root crop that can easily be roasted by the fire. And I think we're maybe like shortchanging the learning process there than we are, you know, bringing something that has to be boiled. Because that could be a challenge, honestly, especially if you don't have good stones to heat up.
Right.
I mean, you can make a clay pot, but then you got to make the clay pot, you got to fire it, then it's got to stay together. Then it's got to continue to stay together. So really, it usually comes down to using a rock, and that could be a big challenge.
Right.
But yeah, it's yeah, I still might suggest to a beginner to start with the shelter portion because, you know, if you can't get sleep, so you're done in the long term. You know, if you can't, like, shelter yourself, you're done. Like, you got to be able to recover. And then once you had that down, then, yeah, I mean, you just imagine how much more you learn. It's kind of lame sleeping in a tent when you're, like... relying on the other things. It feels really stupid to be sleeping in a tent in a sleeping bag when you're like relying on the fire building and all that.
But if you were backpacking and you got lost and you had that tent and sleeping bag, you wouldn't be like, oh, it doesn't feel cool to me to sleep in this warm shelter that's dry. But yeah,
I didn't say whether it felt cool not to. I just felt stupid to. But it wouldn't feel stupid in a real survival situation. You'd be like, fuck yeah, I got me a nice old tent.
Right. So yeah, I think though, like the idea stands, pick some goals and work the thing a little bit at a time. And then once you've got down shelter, water, and fire, which, you know, after doing lots of years of classes, those skills with dedication are learnable in 6 months to a year if you're dedicated to them to a point of proficiency that's not just like, oh, I've done it once, but like you should be able to get good enough at bow drill in a year to go on the landscape with no tools and make a fire.
If you're a dedicated person to learning these skills, I would say that it would be, I don't want to say pointless, but just kind of like a far, far greater value. Just practicing the water, fire, shelter is like a little different. But, you know, I wouldn't necessarily like ever suggest starting with the water and the fire part because it's so easily recreatable at home. It's just a food, basically, is what I'm getting to. I mean, the shelter, honestly.
Well, so that's what I'm saying is like...
You have to sleep in a shelter in multiple conditions to get better at it. You really have to.
Yeah.
But there's nothing else that beats food, right? I mean, it's... these damn laws.
Well, right. So that's the thing is like...
go out and kill stuff.
Shelter, water, and fire, though. My point was like shelter, water, fire are pretty doable. You know,
you can practice shelter in your backyard.
And you can learn them in a pretty short amount of time. Whereas food...
Relatively, yeah.
Food to me is like a lifetime study. And it's kind of cool that it's the thing that takes the longest to kill us is not having food.
Yeah, and you get better at it too the more you do it. I would say it's funny because, like the hunting part and trapping, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
However, persistence pays off in that regard. Whereas with your plant foods, like persistence isn't going to keep you from getting killed by eating the wrong plant.
Right.
And persistence isn't going to make those acorns edible if you don't know how to properly leach them. Like you might even, like my initial thought was like the hunting piece, and the trapping piece, but I actually, like from experience, went back off of that and say like the plant food portion is probably the biggest long-term challenge.
Really. Well, right. And it is a long-term study. Like you can't cram study that kind of shit. And realistically, I don't remember anything about plants that I haven't handled. Like if I haven't eaten something and processed it and I experienced that with my hands, it's in one ear and out the other.
Yep. Or experienced it with your belly.
Right.
And it's definitely like, you can catch those animals all you want, but like it's not, you're going to drive them off or deplete them faster than you might deplete a food source. Like, because they're seasonal. Like you talk about acorns, you're not killing the tree to get the acorn. There's a lot of foods that you can gather without destroying the plant. There's some that you could, but it's a lot easier to say, all right, I know I have exactly this many of this type of food or this type of plant, and so I'll stop at this point, or I'll spread the seeds and hope to get some later. It's like you're better off learning those plant materials for the long term than you would be, Well, God, it's hard though. I mean, at
plants
the same
are
time,
so specific to the area, like
and the season.
Right, exactly. I could learn everything I want about plants up here. It's not going to help me at all down there. Whereas,
it'll help you a little bit, but not real, like not long.
Right. I mean, basic botany. It'll help me. Right. It'll help me learn the things to know how to describe a plant or a tree or what a sepal is. But like, realistically, I'm starting from scratch. Whereas hunting,
don't you mean sepal, Brad?
You gotta get your nature terms correct, man.
You say sepal, I say sepal.
You say sheeple, I say people?
Yeah. But with hunting, like, you're going to want to learn the specifics of that animal's habits and habitat, but it's going to translate a lot more from one location to another. Same with trapping. And
quite a bit. Or pursuing them, too,
right. But I would say
having a good strategy for cutting them off.
Getting efficient enough to really, like, calorically meet your needs is
pretty difficult.
Yeah, it's really a long-term study in any location. And so that's the thing is like you can dial in shelter, water, fire, food, and then you can adapt them to meeting different needs of different locations. But the food piece to me over my, 25 years of studying these skills is like, oh, this is where the intact cultural knowledge and like the intact landscapes make a huge difference.
I would definitely say that water and fire is 100% agreement with you. On the shelter, I'm not in total agreement with you, just like as far as warm versus cold, tropical versus, temperate kind of thing, because you're not doing a debris hut in a primitive tropical situation.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it doesn't necessarily translate.
But I see what you mean.
But the skill sets
you'll
of
understand
like
the principles,
right? And the skill sets of like how to lay things so that they shed water, or how to like tie sticks together, how to make a good lashing with rootlets or bark. Like those things are going to be useful in different environments. And also, shelter is pretty quick to learn compared to the study of food procuration and processing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Once you learn how to lash something properly, you're going to be able to lash it,
right?
Every time.
So that comes down to also like when I think about oh shit kits or like a survival kit or anything that's worth carrying, it's like having something that makes getting food easier, that's lightweight, something like fishing line and hooks, or picture hanging wire that you can make
more valuable. You mean trapping wire?
Yeah, exactly.
Picture. Y'all got any picture hanging wire at this store?
That's how a lot of people know it. I mean, when you go to the hardware store, you can just be like, "What? I need the wire for hanging a picture," and they hand you trapping wire.
Is that where you get? Is that where you get your trapping wire? Downtown Home Depot store.
I mean, do you get it from bushcraft.com?
What, my picture hanging wire? Yes, of course, Brad. You kidding me?
Excuse me, sir. I need to hang a picture from my wall.
Snares.com.
Snares.com. Thank you, Snares.com. Is there even a Snares.com? They should be, sponsoring us.
Yeah, totally.
They're like, you don't have enough viewers. We're not sponsoring you, jackpots. Oh, I meant to say a-holes, but I said j-holes. I don't even know what a j-hole is. Moving on.
Yeah, we could figure it out, but it's not the topic.
No. So yeah, definitely not the topic at hand.
Food for me is the holy grail or the long-term study, and really is also the more local knowledge you can get, it makes a huge difference. It's the whole game is like that local to each place knowledge. Because
I would say,
if you're relying on acorns, like cool, white oaks are every 3 years, red oaks are every 2 years. Like you could be waiting an awful long time if your plan is to eat acorn mash. Like
maybe, I don't know. Have I ever gone and not seen? Is that really true? I don't know. Every type of white oak is 3 years and every type of red oak is 2. I didn't realize that.
At least up here, the white oaks that are up here are every 3 years and the red oaks are every 2 years. And even then, the climate can really affect the boom or bust of that.
Oh, well, definitely that, for sure. I've noticed that. But I know, like in Virginia, I can't recall a time where the one patch of woods, either of the 2 or 3 patches of woods didn't have some type of acorn.
Well, right. And that could be like some trees go off one year and other trees go off another year. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Because they all get flowers every year. It's not like they're not flowering every year. So the possibility for acorns is there. So definitely a pitfall of not practicing the survival. I would just, to me, more, because you can practice shelter in your backyard, you can practice all these other skills in your backyard, you could go hunting and not be in a survival situation. So then it begs the question of like, why utilize like a practice survival trip at all? Because it's definitely less efficient as far as like use of my hours, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like if I only have X number of days of vacation, let's say, per year, and I want to dedicate some time spending all of that time in survival, I'm not going to work on as many different skills. But what I would say is like, so if it's that much of a plus to work on it, then why do the survival? And this is going to seem super simple to people, but it's enormous in my experience. We just experienced it with this last class, is your comfort level. And there's really no other way to learn what your comfort level is and expand it than to, put yourself through some suck. You know, like it's you have to do it. Because I've known people who've like practiced for years, but not really put themselves in a survival situation, and then do that and struggle with fire because they weren't making it super hard on themselves, or didn't have what they were used to using to build that shelter, and like been totally personally defeated. Not like defeated like they were going to actually die, but just like, God, this sucks so much worse than I thought it was going to.
Well, right. So that's one of my big advices for people is like, if you're purposely putting yourself in a survival situation, you have to mentally create a situation in which there is no eject button. Like where you can't, like you have to make quitting only something you do if you're like actually going to die if you don't.
Oh man.
And that's why group trips.
I don't even know. I don't even know if that's possible. I'd like to agree with you, but I'm like, I don't think that's like reasonably possible.
But you know what I mean? Like you got to really set a pretty high bar for yourself. And that's why group trips are great because there's the peer pressure of not quitting. Because it's really easy right? Once you do start encountering that like pushing of your comfort levels. If it's just you by yourself, like it's pretty hard to not just be like, fuck it, I'm walking home.
I don't know that makes the difference in the long run because you can mentally check out. Like this just happens. This is what? I just counted it out, but it's been like 18 years or 17 years of doing these survival trips down here. And I counted it out. It came to like 34 of these trips. This is the third time that somebody left early.
Oh, wow.
So like 30 something trips, somebody left early. And I mean, part of it was that we left a day early. We added it, like we put it out to the students and they added that day.
Right.
And the student who left when everybody else was like, oh yeah, I'm down. Let's do it. She was like, I'm open to it.
Yeah.
And so basically she was probably not ever completely committed in that way. And at the point that she decided that she was going to leave, it was like already she was gone. Like it had already happened at that point. You know, it was like there was a comment about, no, I don't want to try any more weird foods. Which is like, I'm sorry, but an animal's tongue is only weird in America, right? Every other place in the world, pretty much, they'll eat that. Anyway, it's like...
That's put aside as like a delicacy or like one of the favorite foods.
It's freaking delicious, dude. Have you had tongue yet?
Yeah.
It's freaking good, dude.
Yeah, I've had all sorts of animals' tongues.
Yeah, it's not... anyway, but it's like, in that situation, right? They were still there. Right, they were still out there, but like the consumption of food was out the window.
Well, that's what I mean, though, is that
pushing
like
to catch more was out the window. So you could just be like, all right, I'm going to make it through this time.
No, that's what I'm saying.
It's more than just.
Yes, I get what you're saying.
I'm not going to leave.
Right, but so what I mean is like you have to put yourself in the situation where you're not even thinking the trip ends, where you're like, okay. Yeah. The plane has crashed. There is no help coming. I have no other options. This is how I live now. And the more you can do that, the more you'll get out of it. Because realistically, like, you can wait out a survival trip. Like, I've seen people do it where I went on trips with people who, like you said, weren't mentally committed. And they just sat at the base of a tree and fucking talked about the food they were going to eat when they got out. Didn't hunt anything, didn't trap anything. Oh, just the fucking worst. It's now a rule on our trips where it's like, do not fucking mention life outside of here. Like, it's unimportant. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. And you need to be like, there is no out. Like,
yeah, and so I said there's only the third person who's left, but there's been many, many, many people who were mentally never there. Right. Emotionally and mentally, they just weren't even there. Like, I was thinking of a person who basically sat in a little chair he made. He made a little camp chair out of a sheet. And sat in the chair all day, the whole time. Just sitting in his chair. But
I'm going to be a mopey bitch in style.
Yeah, pretty much, basically.
My back will not hurt while I mope my way through this experience.
Well, no, it was like a sack chair, so I'm sure his back hurt really fucking bad by the end of it. Yeah, you guys like my chair? It's really cool. Hey, you hungry? No, I'm good, actually.
Oh,
I don't have any mustard for my meat. No, and then I've, So then I've had a trip where like nobody caught shit, and they didn't even there were beach nuts on the ground. I just got cussed at for cussing. Did you hear Leo in the background? I gotta owe him some money now for swearing. But I've been on a trip before where nobody was trying to get food. There were beach nuts and nobody was eating them. Like, there was fishing gear in their hands and nobody was fishing with it. There were squirrels and throwing sticks in hand. There was people with bows and arrows and they didn't even go out and hunt. They just didn't do it. And we set the ground rules of you can't. So yeah, we don't specifically mention food, but we have a cannot talk about it list. It's politics, religion, jobs, and relationships. You're not allowed to talk about those things.
Right.
Because those are 4 surefire ways to just sit there and argue about stupidity the whole time. So yes, that's another thing we harp on is you're far better served trying to get what you can get than sitting there talking and thinking about stuff that you can't get. This same trip was the trip where the girl kept talking about the Golden Corral fondue cheese fountain.
Oh, Jesus Christ. It's
the
gross.
most disgusting. That's I I don't eat at McDonald's, but I would have preferred you talk about a McDonald's anything.
Yeah,
the Golden Corral cheese fondue, frickin' please make me sick fountain.
Oh, yeah, dude,
can
that's
I please
gnarly.
contact food poisoning fountain?
Yeah.
Like the frickin' that's horrible. Yeah, right?
So-
and that was the whole trip. The
Right.
entire trip, right? Then what do they gain? Should they gain like shelter knowledge? Other than that, arguably nothing.
Yeah.
You know?
So then going back to like what you were talking about, which is the big upside of those trips, is that you can't replace the mentality that they give you, or the exposure to the mentality of being out there. And that would
I
go
would say with the caveat that you try.
right. And then with the thing I try and tell our students before they go out on trips is like, expectations are your enemy. Like
Certain expectations.
well, right. But like Sarah's grandmother has this saying, expectations are preconceived disappointments. And like the more you go into the trip with just saying like, once I get out there, it's me and the skills that I have and the natural world. And I'm just going to do whatever I can to make my situation better nonstop until I die. Like
Along those same lines, if you go into that practice situation and you don't try, it potentially could I've seen it where it just basically made people not want to work on skills ever again because they weren't trying to improve their situation. They were like caving into their discomfort, which is a choice. It's crazy to see it happen, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like you're a little uncomfortable, you're not sleeping well, so instead of improving the shelter, instead of like finding that plant to cover yourself with that takes away the bug bite itch, instead of like, actually trying to hunt and catch that food to feed yourselves, you just sit there and get all mopey, and then all of a sudden, like, you have a choice in that moment, like, oh, I could blame myself and my inactivity on this, or I could just blame this whole situation on it. And a lot of people blame the situation, and they're just like, oh, well, this is all bullshit, and I don't need to spend my time working on this stuff because it sucks so bad. But it's really like, no, you suck, right? Like, you sucked, right? Your mentality sucked.
I was going to say your choices suck.
I'm not saying I'm perfect in this. I've made those wrong choices. However, at the end of it, it's very clear to me at the end, very clear, like, oh, it was this choice and that choice and this choice. And there's never been a time where I've been like, oh, nature had it out for me. And we were talking in one of our early ones where you were saying nature doesn't care. And I would say I personally don't believe that's the truth at all. I think nature cares quite a bit. It's just not selective about what it cares about. It doesn't care more about you than the tree or the squirrel or the fish. I'd say it cares equally about all, but it's up to you to make use of it.
Well,
right? When
I say that, I'm talking about the mindset of like coddled people from the modern world who expect that like the world is there for them and their comfort. That like nature doesn't, like the cold weather doesn't care about you freezing to death. Like it just is what it is. The cold
weather's not going to change for you. You have to change for the cold weather.
Right. And so that's what I mean by that. And
it has pluses too. That's an important thing to recognize. All the suck has a flip side that's like helpful to you.
Well, right. And I mean, dude, nothing teaches that more than scout class, where you like really have to look at it and say, okay, everything that I find hard, my enemy is also dealing with too. So if I'm like, God damn, there's a lot of mosquitoes, you should be like, fuck yeah, these mosquitoes are going to eat my enemy to death. If it's cold, you're like, yes, this cold weather is going to freeze my enemies. Their hoods are going to be up, their heads are going to be down. They're not going to be pay attention to anything other than griping about the fucking cold. So like, getting that like that mentality to flip anything that's hard into its plus side is huge. And then morale is contagious. Like if you're with a group of people and you show people the way of positive viewpoints on difficult things, that can change the whole morale. The opposite is true also, whereas I've seen groups just like tug each other down. And then there's just like the one dude breaking firewood and listening to the conversation, just shaking his head and just like, God damn, you motherfuckers are bringing us all straight to hell.
Every one of you right
exactly.
now.
Like,
And so that person leaving, I've seen, so that was the third time that's happened here.
I'm shocked that's all you've had. Like, that's pretty awesome.
You know, I was thinking about it. It was 4 times, but the other person was already planning on going early. He just went one more day early, like everybody knew. Anyway, of those 4 times, it was an even split of what that did to morale. Some, like 2 of the times, it kind of, like, at least in the short term,
everyone's like, yes, they left. Like, fuck yes. I've seen that.
Well, so I was going to start with the negative part, right, which was like, I couldn't tell what people specifically were thinking in those moments, but there was a sense, like a feeling of like, damn, well, they left. Like, I kind of like to also not get bit by bugs.
Yeah,
oh, I'd kind of like to eat too. And honestly, this time, like, I wasn't going to leave, and it wasn't stopping me, but like, I can be a little harsh, I've been told by my wife about these kinds of things, but at the time, I was good this time. I was good because I was ready to be like, oh, it's just because you're lame, but I stopped myself from saying any of those things. But in my mind, I was like, like, okay, you're uncomfortable because of the bug bites or your ankle or whatever else you're uncomfortable about that you're not telling us about. Like, obviously the food was a problem for this person because they just weren't saying that. And, but the reaction to the tongue was kind of like, oh, okay, clearly the food. Anyway, I was just like, I'm a little bit hungry. I'm not sleeping great. Like, my arms are wrecked from catching that goat that you've been eating for 2 days. Like, why don't I get to go home? But you get to go home, Like, I took that as like I was like kind of pissed and used it to fuel myself in a way. Anyway, I've seen it kind of draw the group down because people are thinking, well, shit, I'm tired, I'm hungry, shit, this does kind of suck, maybe this does suck. But then the opposite can happen too, where it's like, oh, that fucking lead weight is gone. And this wasn't like an extreme example of that. And I was actually thinking this is going to affect the group. It was an interesting group in that it was it was like an unspoken camaraderie. Last year, the group that we had, it was very verbal and like clear camaraderie in a way, I don't know how else to describe that. It was pretty clear. It was like verbalized and made explicit. But this year it was never verbalized. It was never like there was obvious things that the group took the initiative on doing on their own that were like group building exercises, right? Like doing the whole, what was your favorite thing or least favorite thing? Asking questions of every person in the group and everybody gets to give their answer. Like things that are, group morale boosters, everybody getting their chance to share their little story. This group, we didn't do any of that, not like hardly at all. But it was such a high functioning group. And I was wondering, like, is this really going to drag, is this going to slow this group down? It was totally the opposite. It was like, it just lightened it and it was amazing, honestly. So it was like definitely a plus from learning from the person being there, and nobody wanted to say anything bad about them leaving. And nobody did because, it wasn't really like that. But I think it was pretty easily felt. There wasn't like that feeling that person they were relying on to like share their miseries with that wasn't sharing it with the rest of the group because it was setting confidence and like, yeah, it was definitely a lessening of a burden right there. But I've seen that go both ways. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely, your group can be your greatest ally, but I've also had it be your biggest suck factor.
Where, yeah. Well, especially like you going out with a group of like students has got to be interesting because people are like, well, you're choosing to be here. Like, you must love this, and you're like, well, there's aspects of it that I love, but also like, it's still fucking hard for me.
This. Well, not with you people.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. But like I've had situations where I was in that leadership role in a class where it was like people expected it wasn't hard for me because I wasn't whining about it or because I was enjoying myself, but it's like, no, it's still hard, it's still nothing makes it easy to do hard things. You just you just whine about it less.
In that negative group, like kind of everybody's sort of dragging ass scenario. It's like the worst. It can be the worst goddamn thing ever, because you're working super hard to catch stuff, and you're just out working so hard. I mean, the one that I was thinking of, it's like I was out so much. It was so cold sometimes, and I was like wrecked tired because nobody was doing anything to catch anything. And if we were other than Carmen, so if we were eating it, it was because she or I caught it.
Yeah.
And that just sucks when people are complaining and they're whining and you're feeding them. They're like, oh, well, look what I caught for us, right? And I try not to be like, I try, but I maybe don't do a good job of not being like, hey, everybody, you suck right now, all right? I'm working super hard and you're not. And you know how much that sucks? It sucks a lot, so get off your asses and do it. And maybe I should. But I'm usually like, hey, everybody, I'm going to go fishing and hopefully catch us some food. I don't know what you guys are going to do. That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going to be. If you want to, you can go over there. We can fish together. Or even like, okay, I'm going to be hunting over there. So that's where I'm going. You can hunt wherever you want. Just know that I'm going to be over there, so not to, go over there. But you can go anywhere else you want if you want to go hunting. You just kind of put it out there like that. And sometimes groups respond and sometimes they don't. But yeah, that kind of could suck really bad to be the person who's responsible for that. Because I want to eat. And I'm still going to feed them, and I'm not going to, I'm not just doing it because I'm like getting paid to be out there. I'm doing it because I want to eat too. But yeah, it can totally suck when you're the only provider who's trying.
Well,
God, it's the worst thing.
And the reality too is like, as much as I respect the money that people pay for classes, like there are a lot easier ways to make money than to lead a survival trip. Like,
okay, in that scenario, you paid me to come out and suffer with you, okay, to make your suffering a little easier, and because you're not exactly sure what you would do next. So you paid me for a couple of things. One of those things is to tell you this is what we do next. Right. If you're not doing what's next, and I get in your face about it, and I'm like, hey, you suck right now, and like we had somebody who was. In the long run, they weren't there for the class, and I kind of recognized that anyway, but they took the class, they paid for the class, they were there, and they were like, oh, well, I'm not going to go on the excursion to that other beach today because I feel like I'm a danger to the group because I'm not doing anything to help, and so I'm just going to stay here, knowing in my mind, like they brought food with them, and they're just waiting for us to leave to eat it. I also knew for a fact that there was a bunch of mangoes that we were going to collect, but this person was already being super lame. They brought a Kindle, and on the Kindle, she was like, oh, I'm reading this book right now about spending time in nature and how good it is for you. And I was just like, you're reading a book about spending time in nature.
Dude,
while we were in the middle of the
that right there
trip.
Has to be like the most amazing fucking commentary on
you're reading a book about
modern
this.
People.
Are you
Holy
kidding me? You brought
shit.
a Kindle.
You brought an electric
to a
book.
survival trip. An electric book reading about time and nature and how good. I'm not making it up, Brad. It actually happened. Reading a Kindle about Nature Connection. Thank you, Nature Connection. So anyway, I was like,
holy
yeah,
fuck.
I'm going to go spend some time in nature right now. And I was just like, hey, you know what? Here's the deal. If we get food, we're not going to bring it back to you. Because it's totally unfair to everybody else in this group who's actually putting in time and putting in effort that we're going to go out and we're going to gather some food today and we're going to get to eat it. And you're sitting here reading your book on your Kindle, and what we're supposed to bring this food back to you? Like, we're burning all these calories to get this food, and you're just going to sit here and get food? It's just not going to happen. You do what you want. I'm just letting you know right now, we're not sharing the food that we get with you.
Oh my God.
She was pissed.
Dude, I barely even heard anything that you said past the she was reading a book about Nature Connection. My mind is just on a loop, like, what the fuck? What the fuck did you just say? Did you just
Now I'm out of batteries. I can't do my Nature Connection book anymore. I'm ready to go home. My Kindle's out of batteries. I'm done with this trip.
I just got to this chapter about how you should share those mangoes with me. Holy crap.
So classic. Yeah. It was pretty That was a great group. Should I keep going with the stories here?
Yeah,
because that was actually one of the times where one of the people left. Are you ready for this one?
Oh, dude.
The person who left because this person who left, like their whole, like they made their income on their Instagram, and I guess it wasn't anyway. Their social media was all their income, and through this series of stupid moves, had their computer stolen. Anyway, this person walked into the water with their phone in their pocket.
Oh God!
And then was like, "Oh my God, my whole life is on that phone. I gotta go. I'm leaving." Boom! They left. On a plane to Miami that night, walked back to the camp, demanded to be let so they could get to an Apple store. I should stop right now because it keeps getting better and better, Brad. But I'm gonna stop there for posterity's sake,
dude.
It was say that it wasn't quite a shit show, but it was as close as it could possibly get.
Yeah. Dude, we had this group once.
They're lurking.
Where there was a guy who's like had a tiny house on our property, and the whole group but him snuck down to his tiny house, stole his food and ate it, and then came back to the shelter reeking like food that was his. And he was just like, "I can smell my granola bars on you, and I fucking hate you."
Wow. See what you're missing out on by not being out there with the students, Brad?
Well, and so great. The survival trips.
Anyway, to bring this around though, I got to finish this because Kindle lady she came with us, right? Because she took it as like a personal affront. Like I had challenged her, and she was, I'm gonna come anyway. And so she did, and
well,
then
just
I got the
to be
mangoes.
clear, you did challenge her.
Of course I did. Of course I did.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? She's reading a kid. Get out of here. Literally get out of here, please, because you're killing me. Anyway. Then it was like she came with us. They were, on the beach there, and I come out like with a freaking my shirt was stretched to the maximum with these mangoes, like a fat load of mangoes. She just grabs one immediately, starts peeling it, and she was pissed, and she was like telling me all the woes in the world and how unfair of me it was to say that and do that, and I guess to get back to where I started with this is like that's what you paid me for. You paid me. You paid me to get in your face because you can't get in your own face. Yeah. Because you're too lame in that situation to say, you know what, suck it up and go do something about this. I'm hungry, do something about it. I'm tired, do something about it. Fix that shelter, right? I'm uncomfortable, do something about it. If you are unable to do that for yourself, that's what you paid me for. So I can get in your face and be like, yo, you're sucking right now. Put the Kindle down. We're not feeding you, all right? You're fine. Same person. I've been on the edge of starvation, and I was just like, no, you haven't. Total lie. How you don't know about my life? I'm a total lie. You're lying right now. I don't care if you lie to me. I care about if you lie to yourself. Right? Do you believe your own lie? You're choosing to believe your own lie. Right? And I just brought up like a made up scenario. If so and so got injured right now, which was the whole reason why she came on the trip was because of so and so. It's like if so and so got injured right now, you would jump up, you would run up the hill, you would call 911, you would run right back here, you would make a litter if you had to, you'd carry them back out. Or am I wrong about that? Well, that's not the point. I'm like, that is the point. You're fine, right? You're choosing to cave into your discomfort. This isn't life or death right now. This is comfort or discomfort. It's 4 days. It's 4 freaking days. You could sit out there, eat nothing, do nothing, lay down, and you would be fine. You'd be fine.
Well, and that's the thing is like the biggest survival skill is the shift of perspective. Like, can you shift your perspective?
Something about it.
Yeah. Right.
And you don't get that without it.
Right.
You can simulate it all you want, but you need that level of discomfort or insecurity.
Right.
Or like lack of safety.
And that's why like the commitment to a trip will push you to challenge yourself much more than like just going out in the backyard and messing around, which is still valuable, but it's just like until you commit to really pushing yourself, like you're not going to get yourself into those positions where you are uncomfortable. I guess one thing we didn't talk about, which is like, because maybe we're coming from the perspective of running classes where we've thought through contingencies, is like if you're doing survival trips on your own, you definitely need some sort of oh shit plan.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Of
if
like
you get injured,
people who know where you
so
are.
So many times I didn't do that, and it's a good thing I didn't get injured.
Right, exactly.
Twisted ankle could be a real headache when you're like 15 miles back in the bush.
Right. So to caveat that, would all of this would be like, yeah, do it hardcore, treat it as real, but like don't actually kill yourself trying to learn survival skills.
Man perishes from absolute stupidity, not telling his friends about where he went for his survival trip. Is that why these things are illegal?
Not so good at surviving, are you?
Is that why these things are illegal? Crazy. Well, yeah. People are too stupid to protect themselves, have contingency plans.
Yeah, that is a rough part of it, is like the legalities around what you're allowed to hunt and trap. It makes survival trips tough. Yeah, pretty hard.
And how you're allowed to I mean, it's obvious why we have those laws, so I'm not advocating for people to break those laws.
Right.
But you can always practice, like get your hunting licenses, have your trapping license, just have it all, and then do your survival trip. You know?
Well, that's why
Costs
we would
do a
do
little more, but
the origins
for
trip.
Conservation.
Right. Well, the origins trip we would do in the fall, when it was like with a bow and arrow, you could legally hunt squirrels, snowshoe hares, grouse, deer, bear, turkey, like, you know, pretty much all the game animals were open season. You know, porcupine, groundhog, and red squirrels don't appear in any of the the laws in Vermont. So that's kind of a gray area where like
you could get away with it because they can't really do anything about it. Yeah,
it's like they would have a hard time prosecuting you with anything. There's maybe like some general laws that may apply if you were like harassing wildlife, but you know,
we follow the laws, but there's nothing but gray area here.
Right.
I mean, not nothing. The fishing laws are pretty clear, and we follow all those.
Right.
But as far as the hunting, it's like there's a lot of animals. There's no law on these invasive animals.
Right.
So it's brilliant about focusing on those invasive animals. Like, get after them.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally.
Like, you get to learn from them, and you're helping out. You know, just get after those invasive animals. They do damage.
Totally.
Damage.
So with, you know, with people going on trips and then coming out of them, do you have like standard things that you tell folks in terms of like how to get the most out of the experience after they've done it?
Yep, definitely. And that's part of the reason why, like when we do those classes, the class doesn't end till 24 hours after we come out of the woods.
Right.
Because the first and foremost is like, you don't want to get right on the plane. You know, like it's
TSA will not let you on the plane.
You would your stinking ass needs to take a shower. Change your shirt at least, man. Stick on some deodorant. Get what?
Try and get that look out of your eye that says, I might eat that
guy. If I wasn't too lame, I'd totally eat that person right there. So, and that's a big one right there. And it's something that we tend to harp on a little bit, is it's like when you buy in and you actually are making the effort, it's really like a dream. I don't mean that in like some kind of like, you know,
it's a dream.
Yes, I mean it metaphor. Yes, I don't mean it in that sense. Although, yeah, sure. It's like there is a sense to it, but I mean, it's like a dream in that it's not going to feel like it actually really happened. And you're going to feel a big shift. There's no way not to feel a big shift. Like something happens to our brains, our nervous systems, our bodies. And a big part of it is that it's so simplified in that survival situation. Like, I have to have a shelter. What am I going to do? I'm going to build a shelter. Shelter's built. All right. I have to get the fire started so I can boil this water, right? Fire started. Now I have to get food.
Right.
And
life
totally
makes sense.
Just cuts down everything. You don't have to stress about next week or next month or that person or this person or that problem or this problem or any of those problems. You're too occupied with what's right in front of you. So it simplifies life, and our nervous system reacts to that. And then and this only happens when you're not being lame, is like you're fully connected to nature, because you have to be. If you're not paying attention the whole time, you're not going to notice that animal that you want to catch. You're not going to notice that food resource, that fruit, that nut, that seed, that, tuber, whatever it is. Like, you have to be paying attention at all times. And you tend to do that when you're bought in, right? So it's a total, like, there's a reason to have that high awareness. And so you tend to do that naturally. And it's a really totally different mindset than what we live with nowadays. And when it's over, it's like, as we're walking out, I have to remind people that first, we're like, hey, we're not going to just rush out of here, right? Still pay attention. What animals and plants are you seeing? What else would you eat on your way out here that we might, have not eaten while we were out there? Like, what other resources are there to utilize? Is there clay? Maybe we could, just like keep that part of your senses alive, and don't just be like, it's hamburger 30, let me get back to camp. And also to pay attention to, okay, as we leave the shelter area, what does it feel like to go from the trail to the dirt road? What does it feel like to come from the dirt road to like the more traveled part of the dirt road? What does it feel like to come to the paved road and to get back to camp? Like, what are you feeling inside, right? And so, like, you're feeling these changes in your mind and your nervous system happen. And then we get back to camp, and we were well fed on this trip. Like, we were eating fat. And you still pig out on peanut butter and jelly, because how can you not pig out on peanut butter and jelly? You gotta do it. Jelly is peanut butter, is bread, it's good. Yummy.
Oh, this hydrogenated oil is amazing.
Thank you, hydrogenated oil. It tastes so good in my belly.
Dude, walking into a fucking...
simple sugars.
Walking into a grocery store after your first survival trip, you're just like,
a grocery store? Going into a grocery store?
But just the idea, like, I just remember thinking, like, how are these people not eating this? Like, how are there not people just, like, shoveling this food into their mouths?
How are these workers not just eating all day long?
How are they keeping people from eating all of this food?
I would be eating all of this food if I was working in here right now. Oh, my God.
Just everybody in the store should just be eating, like, what are these mountains of food doing?
Walking down the aisle.
No one's eating these mountains of food. There's literal piles of food. I need to pay for
all these empty packages. How much are these empty packages?
It was so, like, mind-boggling to me of just like, what the fuck are these piles of food doing here?
Well, back when it was more affordable and there were like local Crucian food places in Frederickstead, we used to go out to a restaurant that first night. Now we don't go out because we'd rather not go to the bar scene. But it used to be like these cool Crucian restaurants, and we'd go out, and I swear every time we did it, the food would come out, boom, it would go on their plate, and people would just sit there. Like staring at it. That's a lot of food.
Yeah.
Look how much food is on my plate right now. I don't know if I can eat that. And so anyway, we get back from the trip. We're like stuffing our faces, and then it's like, how quickly are you going to change out of your clothes? And it's kind of a weird thing. You've been seeing people in their like action figure clothes for the last 5 days, and now all of a sudden they're like clean. And they've got a different shirt on. Like, wait, we're not wearing red, are you? Holy smokes. Like, what's going on right now? Look at your face. It's
not dirty and it's covered in soot.
It's much whiter. Yeah. What happened? So anyway, these things start to, like, these, I'll say unreality sets in, right? Distraction sets in. And now your brain is starting to go back to what it was distracted with before, and it really feels like it didn't happen. It's not just like, it's over now, bummer, it's over, and I have the memories of it. It's like all of a sudden you're stepping into an entirely different part of yourself, and it's like, whoa, who was that guy back there that I left down in the shelter? And just being aware of that is huge, right? For like carrying that with you. If you're not conscious of that change that's happening inside you, then it's much easier to write off the lessons and just kind of like lose the lessons in a way.
I mean, man, in some ways you have to like cling to that shit.
Oh, big time. Big time.
Honestly, it would be best if everyone came back and like went into solitude and journaled.
Well, we do that, but we also tell the stories. Right. So like that whole peanut butter stuffing your face time is like, now we're telling the stories, and we're purposely like asking, oh, hey, what did you think about such and such? What was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? Or just start telling the stories. Oh
Right.
man, I loved it how when we, came upon that, like that spot where I saw that hole, I was thinking, oh, there must be an iguana in there. When we came up, I was really slow and like paying attention because of that. And lo and behold, the iguana was there. Or like, oh man, I love the creaminess of those eggs. Or man, that boa didn't taste quite the same as the one we cooked at camp before we left. Whatever it is, anything to spark those stories. So we're telling those stories. And then it's like, all right, you guys, you have 3 hours, 4 hours before dinner to journal. And we suggest that people, like, we just give them like journaling suggestions. So we start with like the physical lessons that they learned. So they can go through chronologically, or they could just touch on the lessons they learned. So there's the physical lessons that people learned. Then there's like the mental, emotional lessons that they learned, like lessons to do with their own mentality, their own emotions, and the changes in their emotion. And then there's like the spiritual lessons that you learned, things that don't have like an explicit, countable, quantifiable explanation, just things that feel like, our connection. So when we say spiritual, that could be like, anything outside of the concrete,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, me, I'm pretty secular in a lot of ways, but like if you're gonna see God, it's gonna be while hunting or in survival trip, like,
or feel God. Oh yeah, of course.
That's what I mean
well,
by
let's
see
just
it. But
say,
like if you're gonna look around at the world and be like, what the fuck, this is bigger than I thought it was.
Well, you might need to loosen up that scarf a little, Brad. Take it a little easier.
I see God with my scarf on every day.
It's fucking cold up here. I'm keeping the scarf on.
So anyway, we do the journaling, right? Because it's an important part about it. And sometimes we tell people, like, it could be like a carving on a stick. You could have a stick, and you just carve symbols in it, right? Just think about what happened. Spend time thinking about, not just thinking, but reliving it, really putting yourself there. And that's a big thing about the storytelling and about like the journaling, is not just to like write it down, but really put yourself there. Don't just think back to what my mind was doing. Like, really put yourself in that moment, because there's a lot of times, our subconscious is taking in insane amounts of information and filtering it for us to present it to our conscious mind. But meanwhile, all these other things have come in. And when you tell those stories and you do that journaling, a lot of times you're coming up with things that you weren't even necessarily consciously aware of. Subconsciously, you might have been totally aware of it, but you just didn't think about it at the time because it wasn't important. And so that's part of the storytelling. It's like, it's forcing you to relive it, right? It's not just like, then I went, did this, then I went and did this, but it's like, really sit with it and really like put yourself in that moment. And that's another big thing, that when you take the time to do it fresh, right out of the situation, you carry it with you longer. And those stories become richer, and those lessons become more fulfilling because you took the time to really sit with them. And then, so we'll tell people to sit with it, relive it, carve, or do a drawing. Like, you could be a crappy artist, but do a drawing. And like, when you look at that years later or months later or whenever, you're going to remember exactly what you were reliving in that moment when you look at that drawing, right? You're going to remember it, right? Because you took the time to really relive it, and it's like a physical representation of what was going on in your mind or your heart. And then we do dinner that night, and we're still telling the stories. And then we sit around the fire and we tell the stories more, and we go around the circle and we talk about like, we start to talk a little bit more about like our current feelings and how they have been affected by the group. And the one thing that's like always hits me, that I tend to say, that I harp on more and more, is like, it's such an intimate thing to do this with people. Like, for instance, we caught 3 goats this year, and we were sitting around the fire, and we had taken these noni leaves and like wilted them by the fire, and we put in some wild sage and some sea purslane for spices with the organs, and we sliced up all the different organs and put some of all the organs, and we wrapped them up and like roasted them by the fire. And then you just eat the leaf because it's an edible leaf. It's like a little like organ taco, organ burrito. And we had like one more burrito than we needed. We accidentally did 10 instead of 9. And we're like taking a bite of this thing and passing it around. And are you ever in your life with people that you really don't know that well gonna take a bite of an organ burrito and pass it to the next person and happily grab it and take a bite of it? Like, are you going to happily do that? No, this isn't going to happen. Are you going to like lay down in an A-frame with your head like this far away from somebody you really don't know that well and like carefully and quietly get out of the bed to not wake them up? Like, no, this is not going to happen again. It's such an intimate thing. And it's like really moving for people. And you're just in a situation where it's like, you don't really have much of a choice if you want to be somewhat comfortable or somewhat like reasonably sustainable through the time than to just sink into it, right? You could just go off on your own, but really you're not buying in at that point because you got to share these things. No, I did not know that at all, buddy. I'm getting interrupted by the children. But yeah, so so basically what I'm saying is, what?
There is a bad guy in third.
There is. Hey, Chris, come wrangle your kid.
There's a bad guy, and then...
What up, Chris?
So anyway, what I'm saying is
thanks, Noah.
it's all interrupted. It's Isaac.
Isaac, all right.
He's asking about knife safety.
Yeah, knife safety. That's what I'm asking about. Tell him, Chris. Anyway, what I'm saying is all of that is an important part of the class. And it's all an important part of the experience. It's not just a survival trip. It's like, we have to carry that. Because if it's just like, it's over, I'm getting on the plane, boom, I'm gone, it's so easy to forget.
Oh, you lose so much.
You would think you would stay with it forever, and parts of it you will, but it's so easy to forget.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to not utilize. So that was...
One thing I found with those experiences and stories too is like, if you tell stories for yourself to make yourself look or feel good, then the stories lose power and eventually they're meaningless. But if you tell stories for other people's benefit to either teach them something or empower them or inspire them, then those stories gain power. And it's something that was said to me a long time ago, and I kind of like brushed it off. But over the years, having seen it be true, really for myself, but for others also, like that ability and that nexus in which we tell stories is so fucking important towards being a human being and like your experience of life. And I mean, even just like...
Think about how many thousands of years that was what we did.
Right, and think about how...
as humans.
You know, the things in your life that become important as you grow older are those stories. Like, there's nothing
totally
I value more than like the stories of my kids' births, or, you know, the peak experiences that I've had with my best friends, or, you know, there's those stories, those narrations, those moments that they are so fucking powerful that it's really cool that you all take the time to reinforce that and to like inhabit it with people and make it a part of the experience, because it's just so huge.
That's all part of the reason. So what you're talking about there about like why you're telling those stories, that moment right there where we're all sitting around the fire, like telling those stories, we're telling those stories, in part for our learning, in part for our personal growth, but a big part of it is like, this isn't expressed, but a lot of it is to keep us in that mindset. So it's not necessarily for my benefit or for the student's benefit to tell that individual story right then. Like, there's not a lesson to be gleaned for them or for me from telling that story in that moment. It's more about like, by telling those stories, we're staying in that moment.
Right. Yeah.
We're
you're
staying
inhabiting
in that.
It.
Exactly. And we're still in the dream, right? The magic spell hasn't lifted just yet. And that's like a big part of that. And yeah, when you just like, it's like you go home, you jump in the car, and then you turn on the TV and it's over. It's like you're doing more than just moving on. You're like devaluing what was learned and what was gained by doing the experience in the first place. So
do you talk to people about peak experience hangover? You know, like when we have people leave a class,
not with those stupid secular terms, not with our Titan scarf terms like that, Brad. What did you even just say? peak experience hangover. No, we just say the dream is going to die. It's going to fade. The dream will go away. You'll go back to your waking life. You're going to look back and be like, wow, did that actually just happen? Right? Like, you're going to pass through this veil, and all of a sudden it's going to be blurry back on the other side of the veil. And it's going to be this thing that, like, you feel like you can't reach and you feel like you can't touch, but you can. You just have to start right now, like, telling the stories, reliving the stories while the peak experience is over, right? You got to talk through the hangover, right? Like,
well, and I just
that.
Do you notice with yourself that I don't know? I notice after really awesome trips or really awesome classes where I am my problem.
A total D bag afterwards. Yes, me too.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like in those moments during the class, like you're saying in the survival trip, you know what your next steps are. You just have to do them. You know what your purpose is. You know where you fit in your community. You know that you are an important member of a community. Like, you matter.
That you're part of the earth.
What you're doing matters. And you're a part of a group of people. And like that feeling of being important in a real way, not like everybody's important, but like, no, it's important that I do this because otherwise that guy's going to be cold and I'm going to be cold, you know, like when you do.
What if I don't like that guy, Brad? Maybe it's okay if he's cold for a night.
But
did I say that?
But you get out of that, and then all of a sudden you're like, what does it all mean? You know? Yep. And like, it's not just being tired, and it's not just like, oh, I wish I was having as much fun. Like, it really is kind of leaves you in a space where we tell people, like, be fucking gentle on yourself and like give yourself some room to breathe and like.
And some time.
Right, and you know, don't make any rash decisions, and don't expect anyone who wasn't here to understand what this was.
Definitely that last one. Definitely that last one, for sure.
You can talk to them about it, but don't expect understanding, and don't expect them to give it the importance that you do.
When you're living from the land in that survival situation, right there, it's exceedingly clear your impact on the earth. And the earth's impact on you. So that's kind of like the bridge through which we keep people like sane through that hangover is like, okay, look, see, you still have that effect. You're just not seeing it right in front of you because where did that hamburger come from? Oh, they came from like 5 states over. It was fed by this corn that you're just never going to see that, right? It was killed by this guy. You're never going to know his name, right? It was shipped to you by that guy. You're never going to know his name. It was sold to you by this guy. You might know his name. And then it came to you, right? But you still have an effect, right? But it just choosing to pay attention to that, it kind of helps mitigate that a little bit, and it helps you make better choices when you do the survival situation and you understand and see that, and it makes it much easier to see the missing links in there. And even though like that can like feed into some like kind of silly guilt, grief kind of thing. You don't have to take it that way. And you can just take it as like an increase in your awareness. Oh, wow, I don't know where the hell this came from. And I don't know what the hell this cow ate. And I don't know how the hell it was killed. And I don't know how the hell it was treated to get to me. I don't know how the gutting, did they cut it clean? Or did they spray it down with some stuff? I don't know. So maybe I should make some different choices. And that kind of cuts down on that hangover aspect, that like the dream is over. It's like, oh, okay, we're going to carry this with me through my choices. And it's easier if you do that. But then the flip side of that is like, whew, it's over. Boom, I'm going to jump on the plane. Oh, I'm going to buy the beer. And oh, I'm going to drink the beer. I'm going to turn on the computer and I'm going to scroll. I'm going to start scrolling on the phone now. And like, oh, okay, it's over. Woo. And I'm going to like dive into that. That's when the real hangover hits. You get home and you're like, ugh, you know, like you're going to either like, I don't know, hate what you did or like devalue what you did, or you're just going to like, without really any understanding of it, kind of like just be in a crappy mood and in a crappy place. And then like, you sink into a little depression if you're not conscious about that shift that happens after a survival situation like that.
Well, right. And what's interesting is that like, like culture or our human race has been like clawing themselves away from that experience for, the last 10,000 years or whatever. And it's so interesting when you go back there. And
I don't know. Has it been 10,000 years?
I mean, maybe more, right? Like,
I don't know. I guess it depends. In a way, yes, but in a way, no. I would say definitely the last 200 years.
Right, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
I do get what you're saying, and well, I would say that like that was 10,000 years ago. That was replaced by like the function of religion, and then religion started to turn that into a power play over top of other people, and that kind of forced a wedge in there. But it's really over the last couple hundred years where selling you crap you don't need became the most important thing that we do as humans. But
right.
Yes.
But you know what I mean in terms of
that's where the devaluing comes from.
Right. And like, or like there is a real human impulse to like crave comfort and safety and to get away from like the unknown and the magical, and like it's so interesting because it's not just like it's I guess what made me think about this is like some people are struggling to survive. So the idea of like being a rich white person who like decides to go do a survival trip is like it's a privileged position, or like in the modern parlance, like it's a position.
Yes and no, because what are we losing? Right. That
right. Well, that's the interesting
people,
thing
that
is like
to the earth. That
right. And I'm just like, I'm most of the way through Strangers in the Forest or Stranger in the Forest. And he's coming out of that like 127 days in the jungle, and he's like reintegrating and he's hating it. You know,
depressed.
And he's just seeing how fucked up the modern world is, and like,
and all the disadvantages,
right?
But at the same time, also like feeding his face,
right? and like thanking his like being thankful for his feet not rotting off anymore, and like it is an interesting balance in humanity or in humans that like one of the big things about a trip is that at least you touch that, at least you like see the other side. And where we came from and what we all shared, right? And it makes me understand, like, I'll joke and be like, Matt's crazy for doing trips with people, but like, in doing so, you get to shepherd people through what is like an incredibly life-changing and...
It's a rites of passage.
Right.
It is for me every time.
Right. And it's,
even though I've
something, as much as people pay you to go on the trip, you can't pay for that experience. Like you can't,
no, not at all.
You can't buy that. You have to go live it, and like
they pay for it, and then they still have to do it.
Right.
They still have to buy in, which I guess is any learning that you pay for. Right. You could pay for the college degree, but it could be a bunch of shit and just a piece of paper.
Right.
Or
and
it
they
could
still
be like
have to mentally and
experience.
Emotionally be there. And be with it.
Buy-in.
Yeah.
Yep. Actually make use of it instead of just kind of playing with it.
Right, or like exist through it as opposed to like engage it.
Well, dang.
Yeah, man.
I think we could talk about this one for a minute, but let's call it.
Yeah, it's a good.
But
that was a good one.
I'm pretty sure you don't like that. That's what I've been told. So this is one of the points I brought with me. So I've been messing with that slate, and I'm gonna get it closer to the camera. You can see that the point is blunted and that the side of it is chipped right here on the side, and this one passed through just below the vitals of a goat. It actually did a full pass through and then hit the rocks. And dude, look at what condition this thing is in after passing through the goat and hitting the rocks. This is amazing. This is amazing. I was just expecting this to explode into 1,000 pieces for a piece of slate, a thin piece of slate. I was like, well, we'll see how this goes. And the thing performed. I tell you, you see some of the blood on the shaft somewhere in there from where it passed through. We did harvest the goat. It didn't. Like I said, it passed just below the vitals and completely passed through it, and then hit the rocks on the other side, and then we caught that goat. So yeah, this was a test And now I'm also proud of, like, you know, the pitch stayed on. This thing performed really, really well. So I'm going to continue to play around and always keep some slate arrows in there. I'm sure not all slate is created equal, but this thing performed really well. And that's why you, Brad, don't like that.
I don't like it one bit.
That. Not at all.
I've not anything to worked on anything. I almost brought down a little bamboo spoon that I made, but you saw that.
Oh.
I have gotten my family home safely from traveling.
And I don't like that.
Yes, you don't
I like
that.
That's, I can't say I don't like that to that. Well, anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. If there's something you want to hear us banter on about, or a person you want us to talk to, as we're going to do some more guests. We ain't done with guests. And yeah, like and subscribe and all that other stuff. And yeah, thanks, Brad. This has been a good subject. See you later.
Peace.